it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Heffy Doodle's You Go Gull and a little shellfish. So I've stamped my images out on some Nina Solar White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'm going to be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm starting with my seagulls' bodies, and for those I'm using C1 and C0. I will be using the C3 as well, that's why I have it out, but for their bodies I'm just using those two shades, laying in a little light shadow with that C1 and then blending that out with the C0 and letting that fade into the white area. I would definitely want them to stay looking white. I just wanted to have a little bit of dimension on them. And then when I get to their wings for the lower part that is closest to their body, I'm going to bring in that C3 as my shadow color. So I'm going to lay in a little bit of that and then blend out with the C1. And then I'll transition to the C0, which will just pull it into the rest of their body. And then I will do the other little guy as well. Even though his wing is closed, it just makes it real simple to do. I just put my shadow at the bottom and blended toward the top. Then I'm going to bring in the C5 and the C7 and keep that C3, but this time it's becoming my highlight shade. And I'm going to do the furthest part out on their wings. Normally it's a little bit black or a very dark gray, so I decided to go with this combo here. And that way I just have a little bit more dynamics than just going straight up black. And I'm going to do the tip on the other little guy's wing as well. And then that little white V shape, I'm just going to leave that white so it really stands out against the rest of their bodies. For their beaks and feet, I'm going to use Y13, Y15, and Y17. So I'm doing a very thin little coat of that Y17 on the bottom of their beaks and then down their legs and a little bit on their feet. And then I'm going to blend that out with the Y15. So their legs I'm just going to leave that Y17 because there's not really room to add another color. But for their beaks and feet, I am going to squeeze in all three shades. So after I have the Y15, I'll bring it in the Y13 for a little highlight. And I just thought this combo looked really good together with the gray and the yellow. I love gray and yellow together. For the little tree stump pilings, I'm going to use E55, E57, and E59. I'm using that E59 to put a shadow on both sides so that it looks nice and round and just lifts off the page. And then I'm also outlining all of those little swirls and lines that make up the grooves in the wood. And then I'm going to blend that out with the E57. So I'm pulling that mid-tone toward the center from the sides, and then I'm also tracing over all of those lines again. And then I'm going to fill everything in with the E55. And then when I get to the top, I'm going to add a little bit of shading with that E55, both on the sides and on the swirl. And then I will blend that out with the E53. For the buoy, I'm going to use YR04, YR07, and YR09. I'm coloring these images to match the pattern paper that I'm going to be using, and orange was one of the dominant colors in that pattern paper, so I decided to make that the color of my buoy. So I'm just adding some shadow with that YR09 from all the sides, and then pulling toward the centers of each of those little sections with the YR07. And I'm just making sure to leave a nice wide highlight area on each of those parts. Since this would be made out of metal, it would really catch the light, catch the sun there, and just look nice and shiny. So I want to make sure that I have enough room for that lightest shade, the YR04, and especially on that top part there where the sun would be hitting it the most. And then I'm also going to use these shades to color in the little starfish. And that is the only image that I pulled in from the A Little Shellfish stamp set. I just thought it needed one more cute little element, and I thought that was perfect. So I'm going to dot a black gel pen over the eye of the seagull and the starfish and trim these images out with their matching dies. For my background, I've taken a piece of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock and popped that in my Waffle Flower Mini Media Mat, and I'm blending on some Distress Oxide ink in Blueprint Sketch. I'm trying to match that pattern paper once again, and it has this really bold, vivid blue on there, so I thought this was a perfect match. And then I want that to fade into the sky, so I grabbed tumbled glass for the top, and I'm just going to blend that across the top section and go over the transition between those two. I will go back and forth a little bit to just smooth everything out, but I basically just want it to fade so that you don't really know where the sea stops and the sky begins. I'm going to press a little bit of both of those inks at the top of that mat just so I can have a little bit of splatter detail. So I will water that down with my distress sprayer, which just does not seem to be working right. But anyway, and then I will pick that color up with a paintbrush and tap that against my finger to get some nice little splatters and droplets of all different sizes. And the reason that I'm doing even the light color on the darker area is that, you know, those Distress Oxides, they layer really well, and so it'll almost look like little bubbles. Now, I felt like it needed just a little bit of a darker shade as well, so I also added some chipped sapphire in just for that splatter, and I'm adding a few more of those little droplets, and I thought that went really well with those other two shades. So once this has dried, I have trimmed it down with the Lawn Fawn Outside In Stitch Rectangle Stackables and popped that in my MISTI so I can stamp my sentiment, and I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink to stamp Hey Gull Friend down at the bottom. And I am going to stamp that down twice to get a really good impression, especially since it's over those Distress Oxide inks. I really want it to be bold. Then I'll pop my card based in my MISTI, and I'm using Lawn Fawn's Mermaid cardstock and Peacock ink. And I'm going to stamp the Long Time No See sentiment from A Little Shellfish, and then another one of those seagulls. And you can see I did not get a good impression because those stamps were brand new. So I grabbed my Picket Fence Studios stamp scrubby and scrubbed over that, and then wiped it off with my Lawn Fawn stamp chamois and inked it up again. You can see I got a much better impression. I really love those for new stamps. So I've die cut my focal panel with a few of the Lawn Fawn Ocean Wave accents, and that just cuts those little wave lines into the cardstock so that I'm able to insert some of my images down below the surface of the water. So I just held those in place with a little bit of Post-it tape, and now I'm going to go ahead and start to add my images. And the first one that I'm going to do is the little piling there, and I'm going to tuck that into the wave over on the right hand side, just kind of bending that cardstock back to make sure that I can get it in there nice and smooth. And then in the big one over on the left, I'm going to add the buoy, and then I'm going to put that at a little bit of an angle just to have it be, you know, looking a little bit more in motion. Then I'll grab my standing seagull and add that to the piling. I just love these little guys. I think they're so cute. And then I'm going to add the little starfish down to that piling as well. I was just kind of figuring out the placement, and then I just added a dot of glue there so that I could tuck him down a little bit below the surface of the water as well so he doesn't get dried out. Then I have my last seagull, and I'm going to have him flying in the sky, so I'm going to add him in the top left corner. And then I'm moving on to my pattern papers. I'm using the Sunny Studio Summer Splash collection, and I've chosen 3 different prints. I've got the yellow with the tiny white anchors, and then I've got the wave print, which is basically a tone on tone, and then I've got this bright pattern geometric, and these are going to work so good together. So I've trimmed down 2 of those prints with the Lawn Fawn large stitch rectangle stackables. It's the yellow anchor print and then the blue wave. And then the colorful geometric I just trimmed down with my paper trimmer. I just eyeballed that. So I'm adding the yellow anchor print to the card base to cover the entire card front. And then I'm going to layer that geometric print right over top. It's so bright and summery. I just thought that looked perfect with these guys. And then I'll take the wave print and add that across the entire card front in a horizontal direction. And I'm just lining that up with those grid lines on the paper and making sure it's nice and straight. And then I've added some foam tape to the back of my focal panel. So I'm going to line that up in the center, make sure it's perfectly in the middle, and then I'm going to pop that down into place. So when I ran that focal panel through the die cutting machine, the sentiment kind of got a little bit messed up. It wasn't quite dry. So to fix that, I've taken a little piece from the paper that I die cut it from, flipped it over upside down, and I'm going to re-stamp that sentiment using Lawn Fawn's Hippo ink. Thank goodness it was exactly the right size that I needed. So I'm going to stamp that down a bunch of times to get a really dark impression because I want it to kind of match the outer edges of the seagull's wings, just to bring in that darker gray. And then I have trimmed that down on one side with one of the Lawn Fawn Everyday Sentiment banners. And then on the other side, I've just trimmed it down with that same outside in stitch rectangle stackable so that I get that stitching line again. So I line that up right over top of the old sentiment, and I actually like the way it looks even better. I think the white just pulls in the white of the seagulls. So I wanted to color in the inside of the buoy now that it's on that background. I thought it looked kind of funny because normally that should be an open area. So I just grabbed a couple Copics that I thought would match. I used the B26 and then the B23 for the bottom section. And then at the top, I'm going to use a little bit of that B23 and then pull in the B21 to finish that. I didn't quite like the blend on the bottom, so I'm going to go in with a second layer of that B26 and blend that out with the B23 once again. And then I'm also going to add a few little dots just so that it really matches with that background and makes it almost look like some of that Distress Oxide is showing through those holes. As a finishing touch, I'm going to add just 3 little clear droplets. So I've added a little bit of Ranger Multimedia Matte to an acrylic block, and then I'm picking that up with my embellishment wand. I've added 1 large and then I'm using 2 small. I didn't want to get too carried away because I just wanted a little bit of something, but I didn't want to be too distracting from the images. So I added that last one, just overlapping the edge of the buoy a little bit to integrate that into the scene. And that is going to complete my card for today. There's another peek at the inside and an up-close look at all that detail. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I definitely wanted to get at least one more summer card in there, even though we technically still have almost a month left now that back to school is in session. Just feels like the start of fall. What do you guys think? Are you still hanging on to every last day of summer that you can, or are you ready to move into fall? Leave me a comment down below and let me know. If you liked the video, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. I post new videos every Monday and Friday and occasionally on Wednesdays. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day. Bye-bye.